In 1922, a Philadelphia merchant died with a fortune worth $100 million. That's $1.88 billion in today's money. His stores transformed how Americans shopped, introducing fixed prices, money-back guarantees, and mass advertising when most retail was still chaotic haggling at small shops. But here's what nobody's talking about. This same man who gave employees free medical care and pensions also hired detectives to hunt down union organizers and fired the first 12 workers who dared to join the Knights of Labor in 1887. His name was John Wanamaker, and his story reveals the brutal contradiction at the heart of the Gilded Age. By 1876, his Grand Depot in Philadelphia became one of America's first true department stores, attracting thousands of customers daily to a converted railroad terminal that resembled a palace. By 1911, his flagship store was a 12-story granite monument dedicated by President William Howard Taft himself. The building still stands today, a testament to an empire that changed everything about American consumer culture. But that wasn't the real story. The real story is how Wanamaker created modern shopping while crushing labor organization, how he promoted Christian values while building a system that encouraged people to buy what they desired, not just what they needed, how he offered profit-sharing plans while maintaining absolute control over his workforce. And here's the part no one's talking about. The department store model he pioneered didn't just change retail. It fundamentally altered the American relationship with money, work, and consumption itself. If you're ready to see what really happened behind America's first department store empire, let's begin. John Wanamaker was born in 1838 in Grays Ferry, Philadelphia. His father made bricks. Not a glamorous business. In 1850, when John was 12, larger brick manufacturers undercut the family business completely. The Wanamakers fled to Indiana hoping for better opportunities. They found none. By 1851, they limped back to Philadelphia, defeated. John was 14 years old. His formal education ended after just 3 years of schooling. He took a job at a bookstore for $1.25 per week. That's about $43 in today's money, per week. He worked 6 days. Do the math. That's $7 per day in modern terms. But here's where the story turns. Young Wanamaker saved every penny. He denied himself comfort. He spent money on only one thing: books for his mother. By age 15, he moved to a clothing store where he earned 25 cents more per week. Still poverty wages, but Wanamaker kept saving. At 19, he took a job as the first full-time secretary of the Philadelphia YMCA. The salary was $1,000 per year, a fortune compared to his bookstore wages. In 1 year, he grew YMCA membership from 57 to over 2,000 members. He distributed hundreds of New Testaments. He trained dozens of Sunday school teachers. The religious community noticed. This wasn't just administrative work. It was empire-building skills in training. In 1861, at age 23, Wanamaker and his brother-in-law Nathan Brown opened Oak Hall, a men's clothing store at 6th and Market Streets in Philadelphia. Their combined capital, $3,500. That's about $119,000 in today's money. On the first day, they sold $24.67 worth of merchandise. Barely enough for lunch. But Wanamaker introduced something revolutionary. One price and goods returnable. No haggling, no bargaining. The price on the tag was the price you paid. If you weren't satisfied, bring it back for a full refund. This was unheard of in 1861. Most merchants viewed returns as theft. Wanamaker viewed them as trust building. The Civil War started days after Oak Hall opened. Perfect timing. The Union Army needed uniforms. Oak Hall secured contracts for military clothing. By 1868, when Nathan Brown died, the business was thriving. Wanamaker, now sole owner, renamed it John Wanamaker and Company. Now here's the critical moment. In 1875, Wanamaker made the move that would define American retail for the next century. He purchased an abandoned Pennsylvania Railroad freight depot at 13th and Market Streets, a massive empty shell. He converted it into what he called the Grand Depot. The building opened in 1876, just in time for Philadelphia's Centennial Exposition, when thousands of visitors flooded the city. The Grand Depot wasn't just larger than Oak Hall, it was a completely different concept. Under one roof, men's clothing, women's clothing, furniture, pianos, bicycles, books, jewelry, cutlery, art pottery, and stationery. 49 departments by 1879. This was Philadelphia's first true department store, one of the first in America. The numbers tell the story. By 1880, Wanamaker employed over 3,000 people. The store had 8 acres of floor space. Annual sales exceeded several $1,000,000. In an era when most stores employed a handful of clerks, Wanamaker had created a retail army. Wanamaker didn't just sell goods, he revolutionized how goods were sold. In 1874, he published the first copyrighted retail advertisement in American history. In 1874, he placed the first half-page newspaper ad. In 1879, the first full-page ad. By 1888, he was running full-page ads on a regular schedule. His advertising budget was staggering for the time. He famously said, "Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half." But he kept spending because it worked. His ads were different. They told the truth. They made promises and kept them. They guaranteed quality in print. When other merchants ran vague, flowery language, Wanamaker ads listed specific prices, specific products, specific guarantees. In 1878, Wanamaker's became the first department store with electrical illumination. Imagine that. Walking into a store lit by electric lights when most buildings still used gas lamps. The effect was magical. The store glowed like a palace. In 1879, first department store with a telephone. In 1880, first to install pneumatic tubes to transport cash and documents between departments. Customers watched their money fly through transparent tubes to central cashiers. It was theater. It was efficiency. It was modern. Wanamaker installed restaurants inside his stores. Revolutionary. Women could shop all day without leaving the building. The Crystal Tea Room in Philadelphia could serve 1,400 people at once. The kitchen could roast 75 turkeys simultaneously. This wasn't just convenient. It transformed shopping from a chore into a social activity. He hired buyers to travel to Europe annually, bringing back the latest Paris fashions. He created the White Sale in 1878, where linens and white goods were discounted. He invented opportunity sales in February to drive winter traffic. He wasn't just selling products, he was creating events, reasons to visit, reasons to spend. But wait, here's the kicker. All these innovations had one purpose: to make people buy more. The money-back guarantee wasn't pure altruism, it reduced buying hesitation. The fixed prices eliminated the time-wasting negotiations that slowed transactions. The electric lights made products look more appealing. The restaurants kept customers inside longer. Every innovation served consumption. In 1896, Wanamaker acquired the former A.T. Stewart store in New York City. Stewart had been New York's retail king before his death. His store, the Marble Palace, was legendary. Wanamaker bought it and renamed it John Wanamaker, New York. This wasn't just an expansion, it was a statement. A T. Stewart had been the merchant prince Wanamaker admired as a young man. Stewart's death left a vacuum in New York retail. Wanamaker filled it. The symbolism was perfect. The brickmaker's son from Philadelphia now owned the greatest retail property in New York City. By 1919, the New York store had 100 specialized departments under one roof. It included El Departamento de Latinoamericano de Servicio Personal, a department specifically for Latin American customers. This wasn't diversity for diversity's sake. It was market expansion. New York's growing immigrant population represented untapped purchasing power. Wanamaker went after it systematically. In 1902, Wanamaker hired Daniel Burnham, the Chicago architect who designed the Marshall Field store, to create a new Philadelphia flagship. Burnham was famous for skyscrapers and grand department stores. He designed Marshall Fields in Chicago and Filene's in Boston. Now he would create Wanamaker's masterpiece. Construction took 9 years. The store opened in stages so business could continue. This was an engineering challenge. You can't close a store serving thousands of daily customers. So Burnham designed the building to be constructed in sections. One section went up while others remained operational. Then the next section. Then the next. Like surgery on a living patient, the budget was enormous. Exact figures aren't recorded, but estimates suggest $5 million to $8 million for the building alone. That's $153 million to $245 million in today's money for a single building. During construction, hundreds of workers labored on the site: stonemasons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, skilled craftsmen creating a monument to consumption. President William Howard Taft personally dedicated the building on December 30th, 1911. The only department store in American history to receive a presidential dedication. Think about that. The President of the United States traveled to Philadelphia to open a store. That's how significant Wanamaker's empire had become. The building itself was extraordinary. 12 stories of granite, not brick, not wood, granite. The building was meant to last centuries, to stand as a permanent monument. It covered an entire city block at 13th and Market, directly across from City Hall. The location was perfect. The building dominated the streetscape. The centerpiece was the Grand Court, a 7-story marble-clad atrium that became Philadelphia's gathering place. Natural light flooded through the glass roof. The floor was marble. The railings were bronze. The space felt like a cathedral. Not accidentally. Wanamaker wanted shopping to feel sacred. "Meet me at the Eagle," people said, referring to the 2,500-pound bronze eagle sculpture Wanamaker purchased from the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. The eagle, created by German sculptor August Gall, stood in the center of the Grand Court. It became Philadelphia's most famous meeting spot. Still is today. Then there was the organ. The Wanamaker Grand Court organ. Originally built for the St. Louis World's Fair with 10,059 pipes, costing $105,000, that's $3.67 million today. After the fair, the organ sat in storage. No one knew what to do with such a massive instrument. Wanamaker bought it in 1909, transported it on 13 freight cars, and spent 2 years installing it in the Grand Court. The organ's installation required reinforcing the building's steel structure. The weight was immense. The pipes ranged from smaller than a finger to over 30 feet long. The largest pipes required special supports. But Wanamaker didn't stop there. Between 1911 and 1917, he added more pipes. By 1930, the organ had 28,750 pipes, 6 keyboards, hundreds of stops. The largest fully functioning pipe organ in the world still holds that title today. Daily organ concerts became a Wanamaker tradition, free, open to the public. At noon and again in the afternoon, an organist would perform. Classical music, popular music, hymns. The sound filled the 7-story atrium. People came to shop, but they also came to hear music. The organ transformed the store into a cultural institution. But here's what nobody mentions. The organ served the business. It drew crowds. It extended how long customers stayed in the store. It created a pleasant atmosphere that encouraged spending. The free concerts weren't charity. They were marketing. Brilliant marketing, but marketing nonetheless. By the early 1900s, Wanamaker stores employed thousands. At its peak, the chain operated 16 locations. The Philadelphia and New York flagships alone employed massive workforces. The Philadelphia store employed over 5,000 people. The New York store employed 3,000 to 4,000 more. Across all locations, over 10,000 people worked for Wanamaker. These weren't just stores. They were small cities. The employee dining rooms served thousands of meals daily. The medical facilities treated hundreds of workers. The Commercial Institute taught classes every evening. The recreational facilities hosted events. Managing this required sophisticated systems. Wanamaker pioneered many management techniques that became standard in large organizations. Time clocks to track hours, employee handbooks detailing rules, standardized pricing across departments, inventory control systems, customer service protocols. These weren't natural. Someone had to invent them, systematize them, enforce them. Wanamaker did, and other retailers copied the methods. Now let's look at how Wanamaker treated his workers. This is where the story gets complicated. On the surface, Wanamaker was a progressive employer. He offered benefits that wouldn't become standard until decades later. Free medical care for employees, pensions, profit-sharing plans, access to the John Wanamaker Commercial Institute for Education, recreational facilities. He even built the Hotel Walton for women employees. Employees were treated respectfully by management. Wanamaker forbade managers from scolding workers in public. He instituted Saturday half-days, closing at 1 p.m. By 1900, summer hours ended at 5 p.m., winter at 5:30 p.m. Compare this to steel mills where workers put in 12-hour days, 7 days a week. In 1897, Wanamaker announced Christmas bonuses. Every cent of profit on the excess of the whole month's business over that of December 1896 shall be set aside for division among our salespeople. He emphasized this wasn't regular profit sharing or salary supplementation because, as he said, salary lists here are the one thing we are liberal with. Wanamaker created a McDowell library for employees. He established military training for store boys. He organized the John Wanamaker Commercial Institute Military Band. He founded a women's league for study and mutual improvement. He built a Brotherhood settlement house and opened a seashore camp at Island Heights for the boys who worked in the store. All of this sounds enlightened, progressive, generous even. But that wasn't the real story. Here's what no one talks about. In 1887, the Knights of Labor attempted to organize Wanamaker workers. The Knights of Labor was one of the largest labor organizations of the Gilded Age, advocating for 8-hour workdays, equal rights for women and African Americans, and worker cooperatives. Wanamaker's response was immediate and brutal. He hired detectives to identify union members. When they discovered the first 12 workers who had joined the Knights of Labor, Wanamaker fired them, all 12. No negotiation, no discussion, immediate termination. This wasn't about incompetence. It wasn't about performance. It was about union membership. The message was clear. Join a union, lose your job. Labor activists knew John Wanamaker as a fierce opponent of unionization. While he publicly promoted moral values and Christian principles, privately he maintained absolute opposition to collective worker organization within his empire. Think about the contradiction. Wanamaker offered profit-sharing, pensions, medical care, and education. But workers had no voice in how those benefits were structured, no collective bargaining power, no ability to negotiate. Wanamaker decided what was generous. Wanamaker decided what was fair. Workers could accept his benevolence or leave. This wasn't unique to Wanamaker. During the Gilded Age, many employers viewed unions as threats to their authority. The 1880s and 1890s saw violent labor conflicts across America. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 killed over 100 people. The Haymarket bombing in 1886 turned public opinion against labor. The Homestead Strike of 1892 left 16 dead. The Pullman Strike of 1894 required federal troops to suppress. Wanamaker avoided such violence. How? By creating a system where workers felt well treated compared to alternatives. A department store job was cleaner than factory work, safer than mining, more respectable than sweatshops. The hours were better than steel mills. The pay, while not generous, was regular. But workers had no power. The benefits were gifts, not rights. They could be withdrawn at any time for any reason. And if workers tried to organize for more, fired, blacklisted, replaced by the thousands of immigrants arriving daily through Ellis Island. Wanamaker was deeply religious. He served as superintendent of Bethany Presbyterian Sunday School. He was president of the Philadelphia YMCA from 1870 to 1883. He refused to advertise on Sundays. He closed his stores on Sundays. He held worship services for employees in an in-store chapel. He hired a chaplain. At Christmas, he gave every employee a Bible. But here's the critical point. Wanamaker believed that business success was evidence of God's blessing. He was an early adherent of what we now call the prosperity gospel. As his business grew bigger and more profitable, he viewed this as divine confirmation that he was doing right. This belief system had profound implications. If wealth indicated God's favor, then Wanamaker's fortune proved he was righteous. His methods must be correct. His decisions must be moral. After all, would God bless an unjust man with such success? This worldview made it easy to justify absolute control over workers. Wanamaker wasn't exploiting them. He was providing opportunities for employment under a godly employer. He wasn't suppressing their right to organize. He was protecting them from radical union agitators who would lead them astray. Wanamaker's advertisements frequently included scripture. During Christmas, his stores celebrated faith, not just festivity. Scripture cards were tucked into shopping bags. The Grand Court displayed massive religious paintings during Lent, including Mihaly Munkaczy's Christ Before Pilate and Golgotha. But the same stores encouraged consumption year-round. Buy the latest Paris fashions, attend the white sale, visit the piano department, enjoy the tea room, spend, consume, desire. The contradiction is staggering. Christianity traditionally emphasizes moderation, contentment, charity. The department store encouraged luxury, aspiration, acquisition. Wanamaker reconciled this by viewing commerce itself as sacred work. A store, he said, was a public trust. But a trust to do what? To serve customers? Certainly. To employ workers? Yes. To generate profit? Absolutely. And in Wanamaker's worldview, these goals aligned perfectly. Serving customers meant offering desirable goods. Employing workers meant providing jobs with benefits. Generating profit meant demonstrating God's approval. In 1889, President Benjamin Harrison appointed Wanamaker as United States Postmaster General. Wanamaker served until 1893. He brought his retail philosophy to government. He pushed for rural free delivery, extending mail service to all Americans regardless of location. He advocated for parcel post service, which would eventually allow mail-order catalogs to reach every corner of the country. These reforms sound public-spirited, and they were. But they also had commercial implications. Rural free delivery and parcel post would revolutionize mail-order retail. Companies like Sears, Roebuck and Company would build empires on these reforms. Even Wanamaker's own stores benefited from expanded mail-order business. But his time as Postmaster General also revealed Wanamaker's limitations. In 1890, he commissioned stamps that were derided in national media as the poorest quality stamps ever issued. In 1893, he predicted at the Chicago World's Fair that U.S. mail would rely on stagecoach and horseback delivery for a century to come, completely failing to anticipate trains, automobiles, and trucks. When his department store ordered advance copies of Leo Tolstoy's newly translated novel, The Kreutzer Sonata, but missed the deadline for special pricing, Wanamaker retaliated by banning the book from U.S. mail on grounds of obscenity. Major newspapers ridiculed him for this petty abuse of power. In 1891, he ordered changes in letter carrier uniforms and was accused of arranging for all uniforms to be ordered from a single Baltimore firm to which he allegedly had financial ties. Whether true or not, the perception of corruption followed him. Wanamaker left the Postmaster General position in 1893 when Democrat Grover Cleveland won the presidency. He returned to his retail empire. By the early 1900s, John Wanamaker was extraordinarily wealthy. He owned homes in Philadelphia, Cape May Point, Bay Head in New Jersey, New York, Florida, London, Paris, and Biarritz. His main Philadelphia residence was a townhouse at 2032 Walnut Street, modeled after an English manor house. His country estate, Lindenhurst, sprawled across acres in Cheltenham on York Road. The original Victorian mansion burned in 1907, destroying much of his art collection. Wanamaker built a neoclassic replacement even more grand. He had his own railroad station built at Lindenhurst. President Harrison visited there. The estate was massive enough that part of it later became the campus of Salus University. When Wanamaker died on December 12, 1922, his estate was valued at $100 million. In today's money, That's $1.88 billion. The fortune was divided equally among his 3 living children and granddaughters. His son, Rodman Wanamaker, who had managed the stores and lived in Paris for over 10 years, inherited sole control of the business. When Rodman died in 1928, his estate was documented at $36.7 million, about $621 million today. Let's put this in perspective. In 1922, $100 million was an almost incomprehensible fortune. Andrew Carnegie's wealth at its peak was estimated around $475 million. John D. Rockefeller became the world's first billionaire, but Wanamaker's $100 million placed him among America's wealthiest men. Remember, this fortune came from retail, not oil wells, not steel mills, not railroads, from convincing people to buy clothes, furniture, pianos, and household goods. How did he do it? Volume. The Wanamaker stores served thousands of customers daily. Even small margins on thousands of transactions generated massive profit. The 1876 Grand Depot reported selling 94,658 items and mailing 36,616 parcels on the Monday before Christmas alone. One day. By the early 1900s, Wanamaker employed over 10,000 people across his stores. Each employee generated sales. Each sale generated profit. The scale was unprecedented. Here's what nobody's talking about. Wanamaker didn't just respond to consumer demand. He created it. Before department stores, most people bought what they needed when they needed it. You needed a new coat? You went to a tailor or a dry goods shop. You negotiated a price. You bought the coat. Done. Department stores changed everything. Wanamaker's Grand Court wasn't just a shopping space, it was a destination, a spectacle. People visited even when they didn't need anything. They came for the organ concerts, for the Christmas light show that started in 1918, for the monorail rides above the toy department, for afternoon tea in the Crystal Tea Room. While there, surrounded by beautifully displayed goods under electric lights, listening to organ music, being served tea, they bought things, not because they needed them, because they desired them. This is the birth of modern consumer culture, the shift from needs-based purchasing to desire-based purchasing. Wanamaker's advertising amplified this. His ads didn't just list products, they told stories. They created aspirations, latest Paris fashions, European imports, luxury goods. The message was clear. You can live better. You deserve better. And better is available here, now, at a fixed price with a money-back guarantee. The psychological impact was profound. Shopping became leisure. Consumption became aspiration. Possessions became identity. Think about the broader implications. In 1870, most Americans still lived on farms, producing much of what they consumed. By 1900, the majority lived in cities, working for wages, buying everything they consumed. The department store was both symptom and cause of this transformation. Wanamaker normalized the idea that you should regularly visit a store, browse goods, discover desires you didn't know you had, and purchase items you hadn't planned to buy. This wasn't shopping. This was shopping as entertainment, as social activity, as self-improvement, and it was incredibly profitable. Now, let's talk about what it was actually like to work at Wanamaker's. Yes, the benefits existed: medical care, pensions, profit sharing, education programs. But what were the actual working conditions? Department store workers during the Gilded Age typically worked 10-hour days, 6 days a week. Wanamaker's closing hours were slightly better than average: 5 p.m. in summer, 5:30 p.m. in winter, with Saturday half-days. Compare this to the standard factory worker who put in 12-hour days, or steel workers who worked 84 hours per week. But 10 hours a day is still brutal. That's 60 hours per week, standing behind counters, serving customers, meeting sales targets, no breaks beyond lunch, no sitting down. Women wore long skirts and corsets, men wore suits. In summer, without air conditioning. In winter, with inadequate heating in parts of the massive buildings. Wages were low. In 1900, the average male non-farm worker earned about $483 per year, roughly $1.55 per day. Department store workers earned comparable or slightly higher wages. Women earned significantly less, averaging $267 per year, about half of men's wages for the same work. Let me put those numbers in perspective. $267 per year for a woman in 1900. That's about $9,300 in today's money for 60 hours of work per week. That's roughly $3 per hour in modern terms, below current minimum wage. And remember, there was no overtime pay, no paid vacation, no sick leave. You worked every hour you were scheduled or you lost your job. Most department store workers were young women under 25. Many were immigrants or daughters of immigrants. They worked because their families needed the income. A single woman couldn't survive on department store wages alone. She lived with family or shared cramped boarding house rooms with multiple other workers. She ate cheaply. She wore the same clothes for years. She saved nothing because there was nothing left to save after rent and food. A department store job was considered respectable compared to factory work, but it was still exhausting, low-paid labor. You stood all day. Your feet swelled. Your back ached. In the fabric department, you might lift heavy bolts of cloth repeatedly. In the china department, you handled fragile, expensive items knowing that breakage came out of your pay. The pressure was constant. The profit-sharing plan sounds generous, but let's examine it. In 1897, Wanamaker announced that excess profits from December would be divided among salespeople. But who determined what constituted excess? Wanamaker. How was it divided? Based on his formula. Workers had no input into how profits were calculated or distributed. And here's the crucial detail. The profit sharing only applied to excess December profits. 1 month. During Christmas shopping season, the stores were overwhelmed with customers. Workers put in extra hours, handled massive crowds, dealt with frantic shoppers. Then, after the holiday, if profits exceeded the previous year, they received a bonus. But 11 months of the year, no profit sharing, just regular wages. The John Wanamaker Commercial Institute provided education. But education in what? Skills useful to the business, selling techniques, product knowledge, business practices. This wasn't general education to help workers advance beyond retail. It was job training to make them better Wanamaker employees. Think about that. A factory worker might learn machining skills transferable to other factories. A carpenter learned skills usable anywhere, but a Wanamaker salesperson learned Wanamaker systems, Wanamaker products, Wanamaker sales methods. Leave the company, and that education became worthless. The medical care was real, but it was company medical care. Doctors employed by or contracted with Wanamaker. If you wanted to see a different doctor, you paid out of pocket. And company doctors had a conflict of interest. Their employer was the company, not the patient. A worker injured on the job might be pressured to return to work quickly. A worker claiming illness might face skepticism. The medical care wasn't worthless, but it wasn't independent either. The pensions existed, but vesting requirements were strict. You had to work many years to earn a pension. If you were fired, you lost it. If you quit, you lost it. This tied workers to the company. It discouraged job switching. It created dependence. Imagine you're a 20-year-old woman working at Wanamaker's. You're promised that if you stay 20 years, you'll get a pension. You're now 40, facing declining health from decades of standing 10 hours daily. Maybe you could get a less physically demanding job elsewhere, but if you leave, you lose the pension. 20 years of work, gone. So you stay, you endure, you accept whatever conditions the company imposes because the alternative is losing everything you've worked toward. That's not a benefit. That's a trap. A golden handcuff that looks generous but actually constrains worker freedom. Here's the real picture. Wanamaker offered better benefits than most employers of his era, but those benefits came with absolute control. Workers had no voice, no union representation, no collective bargaining, no ability to push for improvements. And the threat was always there. Step out of line, lose everything. The 12 Knights of Labor members learned that in 1887. Join a union, get fired, lose your medical care, your pension rights, your housing at the Hotel Walton, your education at the Commercial Institute. Everything gone in an instant. Let's walk through an actual day for a typical Wanamaker employee in 1900. You wake at 5:30 a.m. in your shared boarding house room. You share the room with 3 other Wanamaker employees to afford the rent. You dress in your work clothes, the same dark skirt and white shirtwaist you wear every day. You eat a quick breakfast of bread and tea. You can't afford eggs or meat regularly on your $267 annual salary. You walk to the store. Public transportation costs money you don't have. It's 1.5 miles in winter darkness, in rain, in snow, in summer heat. You arrive at 7:45 a.m. The store opens at 8 a.m. You need time to prepare your department. You're assigned to the glove counter, expensive kid leather gloves. Your supervisor inspects your appearance. Clean, neat, presentable. One wrinkle in your shirtwaist might earn a reprimand. Management doesn't scold you in public as Wanamaker's rules require, but they remember. Too many violations and you're replaced. The doors open. Customers flood in. For the next 10 hours, you stand. You smile. You help customers try on gloves. You fetch different sizes from the stockroom, climbing stairs repeatedly because the building has no elevators for staff. You carefully record each sale. You send payment through the pneumatic tubes to the central cashier. You wait for change and receipt to return. You package purchases. You thank customers. Your feet ache by 10 a.m. By noon, your back hurts. You get 30 minutes for lunch. You can eat in the employee dining room at subsidized prices, but even subsidized, it costs money. You brought bread from breakfast. You eat it quickly. You have no time to sit down properly. Back to the floor. The afternoon crawls. More customers, more gloves. Some customers are pleasant, many are demanding. Wealthy women who treat you like a servant. You smile, you're courteous, you never show irritation. One customer complaint to management and you're fired. Replacements line up outside the employee entrance every morning hoping for jobs. By 5 p.m., closing in summer, you're exhausted. You've been standing for 9 hours with one brief break. You help close the department, cover displays, count inventory, reconcile sales. You don't leave until everything is perfect. You're not paid for the extra 15 minutes. It's expected. You walk home in daylight during summer. In winter, you walk in darkness. You return to your boarding house at 6 p.m. You eat dinner, cheap food, potatoes, bread, occasionally a bit of meat or fish. You mend your clothes because you can't afford new ones. You fall into bed at 9 p.m. exhausted. You do this 6 days a week, every month, every year, for $267 annually, about 73 cents per day. On Sunday, your day off, Wanamaker expects you to attend church. He provides Bibles. He encourages moral behavior. You're too tired to do much else anyway. This is the reality behind the progressive benefits and employee care. Yes, it's better than a sweatshop, better than factory work, better than domestic service. But it's still a life of exhausting labor for barely subsistence wages with no power, no voice, no control over your own working conditions. And if you try to organize with other workers to demand better, fired, blacklisted, unemployable. Now let's examine how Wanamaker actually used advertising to build his empire. This is where the genius becomes manipulation. Wanamaker spent massive amounts on advertising. He hired John Emery Powers, considered the world's first full-time professional copywriter. Powers wrote honest, straightforward advertising copy that listed specific products and specific prices. This was revolutionary. Most advertising at the time was vague, flowery prose making exaggerated claims. But honesty in advertising served a purpose. It built trust, and trust encouraged spending. Here's how it worked. A typical Wanamaker ad in 1890 might read, "Women's winter coats, pure wool, sizes 32 to 44, colors black, navy, brown, price $12.50, satisfaction guaranteed or money refunded." Simple, direct, truthful. The customer knew exactly what was offered and at what price. No hidden tricks, no bait and switch. This built reputation. But the ads appeared constantly. Daily full-page newspaper ads. That's extraordinary for the 1890s. Most businesses placed small ads occasionally. Wanamaker blanketed newspapers with full pages every day. The message was constant. Visit Wanamaker's. See what's new. Check today's special. Come in. The psychological impact was profound. Reading the newspaper became an invitation to shop. You saw the ad, you thought about the products, you imagined yourself wearing that coat, using that dish set, playing that piano. Even if you didn't need anything, the ads created awareness, created desire. And the seasonal campaigns were brilliant. The white sale in January moved linens and white goods during the slowest retail month. The opportunity sales in February did the same. Summer sales cleared inventory before fall. Fall sales prepared for winter. Christmas sales drove massive revenue. Every month, a reason to visit, a reason to buy. Then there were the special events, product demonstrations, fashion shows, concerts, art exhibitions. These drew crowds who came for entertainment but left with purchases. You came to hear the organ, you browsed the displays, you saw something you liked. The price was fixed and fair. Money-back guarantee. Why not buy? Wanamaker also pioneered catalog sales. The mail order department received and answered 1,000 letters daily by the 1880s. Think about that. 1,000 daily inquiries, each one an opportunity. Catalogs went out to thousands of homes. People far from Philadelphia could order from Wanamakers. This expanded the market beyond the store's physical location. But here's what nobody talks about. This advertising machine was designed to create needs that didn't exist. Before you saw the ad, you weren't thinking about new gloves. You had gloves. They worked fine. But the ad showed beautiful kid leather gloves from Paris. Suddenly, your old gloves seemed shabby, inadequate. You needed new gloves, not because the old ones were worn out, but because better ones existed. This is the birth of aspirational consumption, buying not to replace worn-out goods, but to achieve an imagined lifestyle. The ads showed what wealthy people owned. The message was clear. You can have this too. You deserve this. You're just as good as they are. All you need to do is buy. And the fixed prices and money-back guarantee made it easy. No negotiating, no feeling cheated. If you were unhappy, return it. The risk was eliminated. So why not try? The result was predictable. People bought more, families went into debt, the economy shifted from production-based to consumption-based, and Wanamaker got richer. By the early 1900s, Wanamaker's advertising budget exceeded $500,000 annually. That's over $17 million in today's money, every year, on advertising alone. That's how much it cost to create and maintain the desire that drove his profits. Here's another dimension nobody discusses. Department stores didn't just sell goods, they sold credit. By the early 1900s, Wanamakers offered payment plans on larger purchases. You could buy a piano for $500, far more than most people earned in a year. But you didn't need to pay $500 up front. You could pay $50 down and $10 monthly for 4 years. This sounds like a convenience, and it was marketed that way. Owning nice things was no longer just for the wealthy. Middle-class families could have pianos, fine furniture, quality goods. Just make monthly payments. But look at the math. $500 purchase price. $50 down leaves $450 owed. At $10 monthly, that's 45 months, nearly 4 years. But installment plans charged interest, typically 6% to 8%, so that $500 piano actually cost $575 or more by the time you finished paying. For a family earning $600 annually, that $10 monthly payment was 20% of monthly income for nearly 4 years, during which time no other major purchases were possible. And if you missed payments, the piano was repossessed. You lost everything you'd paid. This was deliberate. Credit democratized consumption, making it available to people who couldn't afford it. This expanded markets enormously. But it also locked families into debt cycles. You're making piano payments. You can't afford other luxuries. But you see ads for new furniture, new clothes, new household items. You want them. So you buy on credit. Now you have multiple monthly payments. Before long, you're living paycheck to paycheck, not because your income is insufficient for your needs, but because your income is insufficient for your credit payments on desires you were persuaded to have. And who profits? The merchant extending credit. Wanamaker charged interest. He made money on the financing, not just the goods. If customers defaulted, he repossessed the items and resold them. He couldn't lose. This system transformed the American economy. By the 1920s, consumer credit was normalized. People bought homes on mortgages, cars on payment plans, furniture and appliances on installment credit. The entire economy came to depend on consumers constantly buying things they couldn't afford with money they didn't have. Wanamaker didn't invent consumer credit, but his stores were among the first to make it respectable and widespread. He transformed debt from something shameful into something normal, expected, even wise. The result? Families trapped in cycles of working to pay for purchases that created desires for more purchases requiring more work. The department store wasn't just a place to shop, it was the engine of modern consumer capitalism. And Wanamaker got richer with every transaction, every payment, every repossession, every new credit account opened. Why doesn't anyone discuss the darker side of Wanamaker's empire? 7 reasons. Reason 1. The success narrative is more compelling. American culture loves stories of self-made men rising from poverty to wealth. Wanamaker, the brickmaker's son who built a retail empire, fits perfectly. This narrative sells books, inspires entrepreneurs, and reinforces beliefs about opportunity and hard work. The contradictions complicate that clean story. Reason 2. The innovations were real and transformative. Fixed prices, money-back guarantees, department store shopping, these genuinely improved consumer experiences compared to previous retail chaos. It's easier to celebrate the innovations than examine the labor exploitation that funded them. We still shop in department stores. We benefit from the model Wanamaker pioneered. Criticizing him feels like criticizing ourselves. Reason 3. Historical distance makes labor abuses seem normal. In 1887, firing union members was legal and common. No labor laws protected workers. No regulations prevented employer retaliation. From our modern perspective, it seems obvious that workers should have rights to organize. But in Wanamaker's time, employer absolute power was the norm, not the exception. We judge him less harshly because everyone did it. Reason 4. The charitable giving creates a halo effect. Wanamaker funded Mother's Day campaigns. He donated to the YMCA. He built Sunday schools. He gave Bibles to employees. He supported temperance movements. These acts generate goodwill that obscures labor practices. We want to believe generous philanthropists are wholly good people. The cognitive dissonance is uncomfortable. Reason 5. The religious framing provides cover. Wanamaker presented himself as a devout Christian businessman guided by faith. This made criticism seem like attacking religion itself. Workers who complained looked ungrateful for employment under a godly employer. Union organizers appeared to be leading good people astray. The religious packaging made it harder to examine the underlying labor relations. Reason 6. The benefits were real compared to alternatives. A Wanamaker employee with medical care and a pension was materially better off than a coal miner or a sweatshop garment worker. Compared to those brutal alternatives, Wanamaker seemed progressive. This relative comparison obscures the absolute power imbalance. Better than terrible is still not good. Reason 7. Corporate power wants this history buried. Modern retailers don't benefit from examining how department stores pioneered consumer manipulation techniques. Credit card companies don't want discussion of how retail credit normalized debt. Advertising agencies don't want analysis of early advertising's role in creating artificial desires. The entire consumer economy depends on people not examining too closely how we got here. Wanamaker's story reveals uncomfortable truths about the origins of modern consumption. John Wanamaker died in 1922. 400,000 Philadelphians contributed $35,000 to fund a statue of him. 8.5 feet tall, 13 tons. It stands on the east side of City Hall to this day. After his death, his family trust controlled the stores. They continued to thrive for decades. But the department store model Wanamaker pioneered eventually faced competition from new retail formats. Suburban shopping malls, discount stores, specialized retailers. The Wanamaker Family Trust sold the chain in 1978. Under successive owners, the stores declined. Woodward and Lothrop collapsed in bankruptcy in 1994. May department stores acquired Wanamaker's in 1995 and converted the stores to Hecht's. In 2006, Federated Department Stores converted the Philadelphia flagship to Macy's. In 2025, Macy's closed the Wanamaker building store permanently. but the building remains. The Grand Court remains. The Eagle remains. The organ, still the world's largest fully functioning pipe organ, remains and still plays concerts. More importantly, the retail model remains. Walk into any modern department store, and you're walking through Wanamaker's legacy. Fixed prices, product tags, money-back guarantees, multiple departments under one roof, seasonal sales, frequent advertising, customer service departments. These are all Wanamaker innovations. The consumer culture he helped create has only intensified. Americans now shop for recreation. People browse online stores with no intention to buy, just to see what's available. Black Friday and Cyber Monday are cultural events. The average American home contains thousands of items, most purchased not from need, but from desire. Credit card debt in America exceeds $1 trillion. Consumer spending drives 70% of the U.S. economy. Shopping is entertainment. Malls are social spaces. Brands are identities. This is the world Wanamaker helped build. The labor implications remain relevant too. Modern retail still employs millions of workers, mostly women, mostly young, mostly at low wages with limited benefits, and no union representation. The National Retail Federation actively opposes union organization. Walmart, America's largest employer, has a notorious history of anti-union activities. The pattern continues. The prosperity gospel Wanamaker espoused has become a massive religious movement. Megachurch pastors preach that wealth indicates God's blessing. Corporate executives justify enormous compensation as evidence of their value. The logic is the same. Success proves righteousness. This is happening today, too. Look at Amazon. Jeff Bezos built a retail empire by revolutionizing shopping, just like Wanamaker. Amazon offers convenience, selection, and low prices, but warehouse workers report brutal conditions, impossible quotas, and anti-union suppression. Bezos became the world's richest man while Amazon warehouse workers earn barely above minimum wage. The pattern is identical. Innovate for customers, control workers, accumulate wealth, celebrate the innovation, ignore the labor exploitation. Look at tech companies offering lavish campus benefits. Free food, nap pods, gyms, medical care, education programs. Sounds progressive, right? Just like Wanamaker's benefits. But those companies fight unionization fiercely. They offer benefits as gifts, not rights. Step out of line, lose everything. Look at fast fashion retailers. Cheap clothes constantly rotated, new styles every week. They've taken Wanamaker's desire creation model and supercharged it. Buy this season's trend. Next month, buy the next trend. Endless consumption. The environmental cost is staggering. The labor cost hidden in overseas sweatshops is worse. Look at influencer marketing. Beautiful people displaying products on Instagram, creating desires you didn't know you had. It's the same psychology Wanamaker's Grand Court used. Create an aspirational environment, display desirable goods, encourage impulse purchases. The numbers are bigger now, the methods more sophisticated, but the fundamental pattern remains. Create desire, encourage consumption, control workers, accumulate wealth, celebrate innovation, bury the costs. Let's break down what Wanamaker's $100 million fortune actually represents. In 1922, that was $100 million. In 2025, that's $1.88 billion, but raw inflation doesn't capture the true scale. In 1922, you could buy a loaf of bread for 7 cents, a car for a few $100s, a house for a few thousand. With $100 million in 1922, Wanamaker could have bought approximately 1.4 billion loaves of bread, or 333,000 Model T Fords, or built 20,000 substantial houses. That's a small city worth of real wealth. Now, consider how that wealth was generated, from the labor of thousands of workers earning poverty wages, from creating desires that drove people to spend money they barely had, from a system designed to maximize consumption and minimize worker power. Every dollar of that $100 million came from somewhere. From customers persuaded to buy beyond their needs, from workers paid less than the value they created, from a retail system designed to extract maximum profit. Wanamaker's son Rodman died in 1928, with an estate worth $36.7 million. That's $621 million in today's money. Not as much as his father's fortune, but still extraordinary. And this was after years of running the stores, not building them from scratch. The empire continued to generate massive wealth even after the founder's death. The family trust that controlled the stores lasted until 1978. 56 years after John Wanamaker's death, 3 generations lived off the wealth generated by the retail empire he built. None of them worked in the stores. They hired managers. They collected profits. They enjoyed lives of luxury funded by thousands of workers they never met. That's how generational wealth works. You create a system that generates profit. You pass that system to your heirs. They extract wealth without labor. The workers who actually run the system have no ownership, no control, no wealth accumulation. John Wanamaker built one of America's first department store empires. He introduced innovations that genuinely improved retail: fixed prices, money-back guarantees, truthful advertising, customer service. He also crushed labor organization, exploited workers, created modern consumer culture, and accumulated a fortune worth nearly $2 billion today. Both things are true. That's the complexity of the Gilded Age. But here's what nobody's talking about. The innovations weren't separate from the exploitation. They were enabled by it. The ability to offer fixed prices required enormous scale, which required thousands of workers at controlled wages. The money-back guarantee required high profit margins, which required underpaying labor. The beautiful stores required massive capital, which required accumulating wealth extracted from workers. You can't separate the innovation from the exploitation. They're two sides of the same coin. And the legacy continues. Modern retail still operates on the same principles: create desire, encourage consumption, control workers, accumulate wealth. The scale is larger, the methods more sophisticated. But the fundamental pattern is the same. The Wanamaker Building still stands in Philadelphia. The Eagle still guards the Grand Court. The organ still plays concerts. Tourists visit. Historians celebrate the innovations. Business schools teach the marketing genius. But the workers who built that empire? Forgotten. The 12 Knights of Labor members fired in 1887, no names recorded. The thousands who worked 10-hour days for poverty wages, no memorials. The families who went into debt buying goods they didn't need. No recognition. And nobody's talking about this because acknowledging it would require questioning the entire consumer economy we now inhabit. It would require recognizing that shopping for pleasure, consuming for identity, and desiring the unnecessary are learned behaviors created deliberately to generate profit. It would require admitting that labor exploitation isn't a historical curiosity, but an ongoing feature of modern capitalism. Display destroys wealth, savings build it. Wanamaker understood this intimately. He saved ruthlessly as a young man. He accumulated capital. He invested in his business. He built an empire. But the empire existed to make other people do the opposite, to spend instead of save, to display instead of hoard, to desire instead of defer. The department store encouraged exactly the opposite of the behavior that had made Wanamaker wealthy. That's the final contradiction. The man who built his fortune on thrift created an institution dedicated to consumption. The man who delayed gratification built temples encouraging immediate gratification. The man who saved built an empire that discouraged saving. And he died worth $100 million in 1922. $1.88 billion today, one of America's richest men, celebrated as an innovator, honored with statues, remembered fondly. And nobody's talking about this because examining Wanamaker too closely means examining ourselves, our shopping habits, our consumer culture, our willingness to accept benefits without power, our participation in a system that enriches a few by exploiting many. The Wanamaker story isn't just history, it's a mirror. And most people don't like what they see when they look too closely. In our next video, we're examining the Vanderbilt fortune, $200 billion in modern terms, the family that became synonymous with Gilded Age excess, private rail cars, massive mansions, art collections worth billions. But here's what you don't know: How it all disappeared in 3 generations. The story of how America's richest family lost everything and what that reveals about generational wealth. If you found this video valuable, hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives into Gilded Age fortunes and what really happened to them, and drop a comment. What surprised you most about the Wanamaker Empire? See you in the next one.